Greetings of the day, dear learners. I'm Dr. Shaumili Mandal, and now I'll begin my Module 7, that is Myth, Legend, and Literature. In my earlier modules, I have discussed about history of folklore, its narrative genres, rites and rituals, folk performances, and also about the poetry traditions of India. This week, that is in module number 7, I'll be focusing on the myths, legends, and literature with context to India. My first lecture will be Interrelationship among myth, legend, and literature. Second one, Myths of East and Northeast India. Lecture 3, Myths of North India. Lecture 4, Myths of Central and West India. Lecture 5 will be Myths of South India. So now I'll start with Lecture 1. The first thing which I'll be discussing in this lecture is about myth. What is a myth? Myth is a narrative which defines and has cultural and religious beginnings. They refer to the beginnings in a sacred sense. Myths also have heroes and archetypes and are often coded with metaphors. Myths are often held true by few of the members of the society. They are also sacred and follow a mystical and poetic language. Popular myths in India are divided into three categories. They deal with mythical gods, goddesses, and sages. Many of the myths of our country are about gods like Shiv and Vishnu. We come across many accounts about the marriage of Shiv or the birth of his sons Ganesh and Kartikeya. We also have stories about Lakshmi, Parvati, and Saraswati. Many popular myths refer to the Shaptarishis or the seven sages. Many narratives pertain to the origin of towns and places. For example, the town of Meerut refers to the demon Mai and Mandodari, the wife of Ravana and the daughter of Mai. Meerut is closely connected with the Maharashtra. The place of Kurukshetra is associated with battlefield, where the Kauravas are said to have fought with the Pandavas. There are many myths connected with places of worship and religion. Many pilgrim spots are said to cure and reward persons. Myths, we can say, are generally stories that explain the origin of life and the universe. On the explanation of life and universe, there are many myths that deal with gods or goddesses or heroes or heroines. The origin of life and the universe is traced to the thoughts and actions of them. Myths of such nature are commonly associated with with the institutionalized religions such as Hinduism, Christianity, and other. But there are also many myths that explain the origin in terms of thoughts and actions of human beings. However, all myths do not use an abstract concept of time. In many tribal beliefs, origin is often explained in reference to nature, such as the sun, the moon, the wind, or water, or natural phenomenon. That is, events related to nature. The universe and life forms emerge from nature. The role of an individual or a family or a community is associated with this process of emergence and subsequent spread of human habitation across geographical spaces. These individuals or families or communities are not historical in nature. They are creations of people's faith and their attempts to explain the life and the universe, which means explaining how they themselves came into existence in the world. Here I have attached a photo of the war, which shows that this is also a part of the myth. And here I have attached the photo, as I said, of a mythical war. which shows how myth is formed in the society. According to Claude Levi Strauss, a very noted anthropologist, who in his book discussed the purpose of a myth, and he said that a myth should provide a logical model capable of overcoming a real contradiction. To understand a myth, it must be broken down into its constituent elements and understood as binary opposites. The breakdown is the structure, as the constituent elements are always organized in a particular way that needs to be analyzed. The structure is the form, and the details of the story are the content. A myth, according to Levi Strauss, is both historically specific, it's always almost set in some time ago, and ahistorical, meaning that the story is timeless. As history, myth is parole. As timeless, it's lang. We are discussing, I told you the terms which Saussure has used, lang and parole. Levi Strauss says that myth also exists on a third level, in addition to lang and parole, which also proves that myth is a language of its own and not just a subset of language. He explains that level in terms of the story that the myth tells. The story is special because it survives any and all translations, while poetry is that which can't be translated or paraphrased. Levi Strauss says that myth can be translated, paraphrased, reduced, expanded, and otherwise manipulated without losing its basic shape or structure. He doesn't use this term, but we might call that third aspect malleability. He also gives us the concept of mythemes, which is the smallest component part, and each mytheme is usually one event or position in the story, the narrative of the myth. The mythemes can be dealt diachronically or synchronically. The story or narrative of the myth exists on the diachronic, that is, the left to right axis, in non reversible time, and the structure of myth exists on the synchronic, that is, the up and down axis, in reversible. Now, I'll come to the next point, that is, legend. So, what are legends? Legends are short, oral prose narratives created by the people and passed from one generation to another. The stories are rather unusual, extra formal, and also fantastical or metaphysical. The bearers of such legends identify them as an account or a chronicle. The Grimm brothers collected several legends, folk tales, and many others. The legend has no definitive text and is often a part of informal communication. They often are ordinary situations with an extraordinary twist. They emerge out of social context and interactions, and their themes are varied, such as murder, violence, revenge, warnings, pleasant surprises, embarrassing situations, and practical jokes. They have no single meaning and can be informative and entertaining. Here, I have attached a photo of the Mayan civilization, the Incas, we say, who are also a part of our legend. Next, I'll be talking about the deification. What is deification? What do you think? Deification is the act of making someone or something a deity. It describes the act of treating a person, being, or idea as divine or bestowing onto them the divine status in religious or philosophical context. This can happen in a number of ways, as religious deification. People who are revered or worshipped as divine creatures, such as saints, heroes, or kings, and may be deified in many different religions. For instance, in the religion of ancient Rome, rulers might be considered gods by their subjects after they passed away. In certain philosophical systems, a person's spiritual or moral elevation towards the divine or ultimate reality is referred to as deification. The idea of reaching a state of perfection or unity with the divine is frequently linked to this. Cultural deification is the practice of treating historical personalities, famous people, or even abstract concepts as larger than life representations of greatness or divinity. I have attached a photo of the Ganesha, the idol of which is situated in Tengger Semeru National Park, which is home to Mount Bromo, one of Indonesia's active volcanoes. The local calls the peak, which bears Lord Brahma's name, Bromo. The Hindus actually worship this idol and they are influenced by it. Tengaris even observe Hindu calendar based customs. According to legend, the Tengaris community, which includes Javanese Hindus, built this specific idol at the foot of Mount Bromo approximately 700 years ago. They continue to offer sacrifices to the deity in the hope that it will shield them from the active volcano. So we see how a myth turns and an idol turns to a deity, the deification. Next, I'll be talking about the relation between myth, legend, and deification. Now, I have discussed that deification is the elevation of mortals or heroes to divine status, or the involvement of gods in human lives, which occurs frequently in myths. We all know about the Greek myths and the Roman myths, where heroes like Hercules, for instance, were occasionally elevated to godhood in the Greek and also in the Roman mythologies. Gods in myths also carry out deeds that validate their divinity, which shapes how they are regarded or worshipped. Deification can occur in legends also, when heroes or historical characters are exalted, sometimes even given the status of gods or other divinities. For example, there are legends in many cultures about warriors, kings, and other individuals who are important actually, and are later considered semi divine or deified. Legends also serve as a narrative vehicle for deification, influencing the transformation of a mortal into a significant character in the divine realm. Deification, we can say, is the outcome of the influence of both myths and legends. Myths present the stories of gods and their creation or transformation, and legends recount the lives of humans who achieved extraordinary feats, with some even attaining the divine status posthumously. Therefore, the themes of deification are explored both in myths through gods and their stories and legends, that is, through mortal heroes becoming gods. I have attached here a photo of the goddess Manasa, right? And Manasa's deification describes how she became a well known goddess who is revered and adored throughout India, especially in Bengal. In Hindu religious traditions, earlier, Manasa was not one of the goddess who was worshipped. She struggled to get, herself worshipped by the devotees. She kind of took all the steps so that people give her the recognition of a goddess. We all know the story about Lokhinder and Behula and how she tried and she kind of desperately tried to make Chand Saudagar worship her. We all know the story about it, right? And she succeeded at last because Behula, the youngest daughter in law of Chand Saudagar, persuaded her father in law to worship Manasa, which was Manasa's, we can say, victory in her own way. Her deification entails her transformation from a local or regional deity to a well known figure. Interestingly, Manasa is the daughter of Lord Shiv. Still, she did not get her own due in our religion, which she tried actually to get, and she has got now. Her elevation to divine rank and her veneration as a goddess of snakes, healing, fertility, and protection are hallmarks of her deification process. At first, local people probably worshipped Manasa as a regional deity, particularly those who interacted with snakes and agricultural life. Her story grew throughout and in the evolution of time, and now she's increasingly revered throughout India, particularly in regions where snake bites are common. And we also have the very famous Manasa Puja in Bengal, and we also celebrate Nag Panchami for the respect of goddess Manasa throughout India. As her tales proliferated, Manasa's standing within the Hindu pantheon was transformed. I said that of a local spirit or a nature goddess to a complete deity. This procedure is a part of a larger phenomenon in which folk gods or lesser deities are integrated into mainstream Hinduism, often by elevating their divine roles. And literature plays a very important role in it. Manasa's fight for acceptance is one of the main themes, and there are poets who have written about Manasa and her struggle. At first, the other gods, especially Lord Shiva, who she begged for approval, did not view her as a great goddess. So you can imagine she faced her first rejection from her own father, who did not want to recognize her as a deity. But later she struggled and she persuaded and ultimately put herself into the Hindu pantheon. Over time, Manasa overcame her obstacles and eventually became a recognized and worshipped deity. Now, I'm going to talk about the reflection on literature. Myths, legends, and the concept of deification have been reflected in literature. Now, I'll tell you a very interesting difference between what is a myth and how myths have been, you can say myths have been imbibed in literature with respect to the folk tales. Because folk tales, in regard with time, unlike folk tales, since myths are explanations of origin of the life and the universe, most myths generally explain in terms of a time sequence. That is, giving a sequence when it happened and how it happened. For example, in the Hindu origin myths, the concept of yug or ages is a specific time sequence. One of the most common origin myths in Hindu religion is that of the 10 incarnations or avatar of the goddess Vishnu on earth. Folk tales, interestingly, are similar to myths in one way. Like folk tales, myths are also based on oral narratives. That is, they too are in the form of stories. And the distinction between myths and folklore is a kind of, blurred now. Because myths are not based now on concepts of time, but rather on nature and natural phenomenon. It becomes historically difficult to trace myths after a specific period of time. Folk tales and myths belong to different genres or classification, but they tend to share more commonalities, as I said. In other words, these oral narratives, myths, folk tales, and legends, they have been always, oral in nature. Means they have been passed down through generations, through verbal mode. But after a certain point of time, they have been written down. So now we have literature where we have myths, we have legends, and also we have folk tales. We have them in a more written form. And as I said in my earlier point, that the rise of Manasa or the deification of Manasa in India is largely contributed to her recognition also in the literature, which made people aware that she exists. So literature plays a very important part in myths, legends, and also folk tales. About the folk tales I have discussed in my previous lecture. The meaning of myths and legends have been discussed in terms of nature of narrative, function of the narrative, and social context of the narrative. In the nature of narrative, also called the narrative structure, certain elements are identified as peculiar or primary. And based on that classification, the primary object of the method is to highlight the elements that respective categories of myths or oral narratives emphasize more or exist as central to them. Based on the understanding, myth and the other legends and everything explain about their own way how they are evident in the society. They have been understood based on what function they perform in a given society. They are based on their function in rituals, festivals, customs, and ceremonies, giving moral lessons, narratives on origin of the community. In other words, it is the function of the myth, folktale, and legend in a given situation or event that gives them their meaning. It is such an approach to understand the meaning of folk tales or myths, the societies which they take into consideration. The society considers them. The nature of the society is taken as central to knowing the meaning of the myths I have said that exist in the society. Therefore, if the society is primarily, for example, a tribal society, the folktales and myths would be considered examples of cultural forms of such a society. Similarly, if the society is seen as agricultural in nature, as opposed to shifting cultivation or industrial society, like we are keeping those points apart, if we completely consider them as agricultural in nature, the myths would be considered examples of cultural forms that exist in such a society. Most studies have shown that myths and legends, they are a complete folklore, we can say, right? They comprise the folklore. Myths, legends, folk tales are what folklore is made of, right? And they can undergo certain changes over a period of time, as well as when they move from one society to another. It is pointed out that the same myths, legends, or folk tales, when recorded at different periods of time, are not always necessarily the same. Different studies on this issue have indicated three conclusions in this regard. Firstly, because they are oral in nature, therefore, it is possible for them to differ from individual to individual or from one social group to another. But secondly, the different versions do have certain common elements or themes. Once these elements or themes are identified, it is possible to see that their changes have been in the ornamentation of the tale or myth, not its central elements or themes. In other words, the properties have remained same. Thirdly, the change can occur in the basic properties of a myth, both historically and geographically. But in such cases, the changes that the given society or societies themselves have undergone during the period or nature of relation that they have had with other societies are also taken into context. So we can say that everything what is written in literature, be it a myth, be it a legend, or be it a folk tale, it is based on the different time on when they have been recorded. It might have different versions. So we can say that a certain myth can have a certain version in one literature, but the same myth can have some other version in some other literature, which we can say that they have been interpreted in different time, by different people, and in different context. So they might have the same basic themes, but it changes with the evolution of time and the version of the people. Therefore, we have same myth with different version in different literature. And people follow those literature and they pass it on through generations. So we have, literature is very important in recording the myths, legend and folk tales, because by that we get a variety of them, which is actually useful for us, and we can delve into the different aspects how a myth is described. So now we are coming to the end of our lecture. Thank you for listening to me and see you in the coming lectures.